This is on now, I believe. So I'm just going to sit, if that's okay with you, so I can also get access to my presentation. So as Mr. Professor said, I'm from SDL, which is a British company who deals with translation services and technology. Myself, I'm a computer scientist. I've graduated from the Polytechnic University of Timișoara in 2006. So I'm not from Cluj and I haven't studied here, so it's an honor to be able to present in this magnificent hall. And basically for the next hour or so, I'm going to present you my findings on the global trends in the natural language processing industry. So they are my views, just so you know. They're not SDLs. We don't really do market studies as SDL. We do software. But I hope that what I'm going to present here is going to be interesting for you and can be used as a basis of discussion afterwards at lunch and between the sessions. So first of all, this is the agenda. So I'm obligated to present to you a little bit about the company since I'm representing it. Then I'm going to move over to the NLP industry trends. I'm also going to talk about my findings regarding the Romanian NLP industry, both in regards to language coverage and also technologies, and then we can have a question and answer session. So who is SDL? SDL is one of the biggest translation companies in the world. It was founded in 1992 and it's headquartered in the UK. We work with, I would say, 99% of all the big companies in the world, from Apple to BMW to all the automotive technology, pharma companies. They're our customers. We work with large organizations, we work with government organizations. Myself, I'm the director of the SDL government division, so I mostly work with intelligence agencies, law enforcement, public institutions, customers like NATO, the European Commission, various police organizations across the world. And what SDL is actually very specialized in is not just translation services, because in essence we are a translation company. We have around 2,000 in-house translators who basically translate anything that the customer wants, from the Philips service manuals to the Beko machine washer manuals up to websites and other type of documents. But we also have a very large division that produces software for translation. We have around 14 software products designed for different verticals, from automotive to pharma to government to marketing, basically trying to cover any type of translation need that an organization might have. We provide software ranging from machine translation to translation productivity, translation management, and even content management software. So theoretically, if you're a customer and you have content and you want to do something with it, SDL has the software for it. Now, the key products that we have are actually the ones that we position in verticals where we are industry leaders worldwide. So if you've studied a little bit on applied linguistics, probably you know that every translator in this world is using a tool called Shradha Studio, and that's an SDL-owned tool. On the other side, we're one of the leaders in SDL in machine translation technologies, and we have been for over 15 years. And that's actually where I come from. Most of the work that I do revolves around machine translation, revolves around artificial intelligence. Although I'm not a researcher and I don't really create machine translation technologies for SDL, I do implement projects around it, I sell it, and I basically create consortiums that cover AI requirements for our customers. So I have a pretty good grasp of everything from speech to text, text analytics, and machine translation. So my focus is going to be obviously on machine translation. That's the key technology that SDL offers, and that's where we are very well positioned to even be considered market leaders and innovators in this field, even alongside Google and other more traditional machine translation vendors. So if you're curious about what SDL has to offer, you just need to go to sdl.com/mt from machine translation. You're going to see our product offering there. Basically what we're doing is we're not selling machine translation like Google is, which in fact they're not selling it. It's just an add-on to their product suite. We sell it to government organizations and public sector institutions who have a need to translate multilingual content. So it won't be too exaggerated to say that most of the big counter-terrorist operations that the U.S. Army have done in the last 20 years were done using our technology, because it's embedded in every single one of their systems, from big data centers that process the entire internet and translate it, up to handheld devices that military forces use on the field to translate documents that they've captured from the battlefield. Our technologies are based on neural networks, so there's been an evolution in the past 2 years to move from statistical machine translation to neural machine translation. We have 3 R&D centers. The biggest one that hosts 14 of our research engineers is based in Los Angeles. We have one in Cambridge and one in Cluj-Napoca. So in Cluj-Napoca, SDL has an office with about 300 people. That's where I work. Most of the software that's created at SDL is created here in Cluj. The support and the marketing is done from Cluj, and this is where I also work in. But by the way, it'd probably be interesting to note that the head of research at SDL is Dragoș Munteanu, so a Romanian. Actually, most of our researchers are Romanian, and I'm going to tell you why. So this is not just any British multinational company. It actually has a strong footprint in Romania. The foundations of its machine translation technologies come from Romania, and all the products that it produces are produced here in Romania. It's not an outsourcing company. We have actual people who work on products, who design these products here in Cluj. We have a lot of patents in the field, so if you're curious just to see how many patents we have on statistical machine translation and on managing a bilingual corpus, you can search it. We have over 100. We have a lot of patents that are currently used by other machine translation vendors. So we are continuously innovating in this field, and we are regarded as one of the leading companies in the world that deals with machine translation. And this is just a brief history of our machine translation technologies. So back in the early 2000s, SDL was using a rules-based system, a rules-based machine translation system, and their only goal was to make their translators work faster. So they weren't using it to translate content or web content or anything that Google was doing at the time. They were just using it to see if the translators can actually work faster if they post-edit pre-translated content rather than translating it from scratch. And it had, I would say, minimal results, because it was a lot of effort to create a rule-based system. A lot of linguists had to work on a language model, and it wasn't scalable, and it wasn't feasible. That's until 2002, where Daniel Marcu, who's from Cluj-Napoca, together with the USC professor from Los Angeles, Kevin Knight, founded Language Weaver. Some of you may be familiar with it, which promoted the first commercially available statistical machine translation engine. So this is where the roots of SDL's artificial intelligence lie. It's actually with Daniel Marcu. It's with his team that he onboarded from USC. Most of them are Romanian. It's with the Cluj office. That's what's funded by Daniel Marcu and Language Weaver. So in essence, this multi-billion corporation, which is SDL, has most of its artificial intelligence designed and managed by Romanian researchers. Most of the projects that Language Weaver was doing between 2002 and 2010 were with the US government. So they got a lot of grants from DARPA, from In-Q-Tel, from the CIA, from FBI to develop machine translation. Just so you imagine, back then to create a new language combination, let's say Arabic to English, would cost around $5 million. So it was a lot of effort. That's not the case now. With neural networks, you can do it very easy. There's a lot of data available. You don't need so much data. There's frameworks to create it. There's open source machine translation frameworks you can do it, and the effort is less, I mean, significantly less. And basically what Language Weaver did, it positioned itself as an innovator and leader in statistical machine translation. There were probably another 2 companies that were doing it in the world, Systran and probably Aptec from the US. And what happened is, because of all this exposure, SDL decided to buy Language Weaver in 2010. And that's where basically myself and other people from Language Weaver became part of SDL, which is, as I mentioned, the biggest translation company in the world. And then we started engaging with other use cases. So we've positioned machine translation internally at SDL to make the translators work faster. We started going into other use cases. And basically, to my knowledge, we provide most of the machine translation projects in the world for enterprises. So I'm not comparing ourselves to Google, which is a consumer solution. It's browser-based, anyone can use it. By actually selling machine translation to companies, SDL has definitely has been the most successful company in the world on this front. And for the past 3 years, starting from 2016, we've basically invested in neural machine translation. We have a very fresh product released quite recently, which we call Neural Machine Translation 2.0. Which is state-of-the-art. It's reached almost human quality on some languages and for some content types, so it's comparable to Google, who has obviously much more resources to invest in this area. And this is what I do at SDL. I sell machine translation, I work with government customers to implement machine translation solutions for them, and I try to find new partners to promote our machine translation solution as part of their solutions. So this is just a brief history to understand where SDL is coming from and where its machine translation solutions are coming from. And I'm going to switch to the main part of the presentation, is basically the NLP industry overview. So just a word of advice. I mean, when the industry talks about NLP, there isn't a consistent way of what NLP actually means. So if you see here, there are 5 main scenarios: machine translation, speech recognition, text analytics, conversational AI, and optical character recognition. If you talk with somebody from a company, they would tell you that speech-to-text is not part of NLP. If you talk to some researchers, they would tell you that OCR is not part of NLP. But actually, I tend to consider them part of NLP because they handle the same task. They deal with language, whether it's spoken, whether it's written, or whether it's handwritten. And basically, this is what the industry regards as commercially viable NLP. So what the industry is typically looking for is solutions that solve a real-life problem and do it with a cost factor that would eliminate the need for humans. Everything else is basically non-present in the industry. So I've sold machine translation, I've sold named entity recognition, I've sold speech-to-text for broadcast monitoring. However, there isn't any company there looking for part of speech tagging. That's academic. That's maybe just a component within another system. But the capabilities, the syntax-driven capabilities that I've mentioned there at the bottom, are basically things that the industry doesn't really invest in. They're things that help researchers build better products, but in the end, the industry buys products. So what I'm going to show you is a financial view of the market to understand how people position themselves when they say they promote NLP or promote text analytics or promote speech technologies. There isn't a consensus. There's a lot of confusion around what NLP can do. What I can tell you is that the most viable NLP technology out there is machine translation. It's the easiest to understand, it's the easiest to implement, and it's the closest to human quality, and it has the most success. On the other hand, speech-to-text is still very complicated, it's still very hard to implement in its customization. There isn't a lot of need in the industry for speech-to-text. Text analytics, although from my perspective, it's a very interesting technology to understand content automatically. It's still in its infancy. The biggest text analytics company in Europe, which is Express System, does 30 million euros a year, which is not a lot. I mean, Fortec probably, which is a software company from Cluj, does more, so the industry is still small. Optical character recognition has been around for a while, it's very established, and the switch to neural technologies hasn't done a significant leap in the market, so switching from statistical or the old systems to neural didn't really explode the market, it just made it a little bit better. So there's a lot of fragmented views on the market, and this is where I'm aiming for. So if you look at the Gartner hype cycle for AI, and this is published almost every year, and it's basically trying to show, where are the current AI technologies. You're going to see that NLP is somewhere around there on the through of disillusionment, and at the high end, which means that the technologies are established and people are using them and paying money for them, is speech recognition and GPU accelerators. And obviously, the innovation trigger is artificial general intelligence, which is still a concept that people, they don't even know what it could be or what it is. This is a hype cycle. Hype cycle means that it doesn't reflect what the industry is buying in terms of artificial intelligence. It represents what the industry and the public is seeing in terms of artificial intelligence. And seeing means what they read on the news, all those Elon Musk articles that are completely bogus, all those, the Chinese has created a robot that can feel articles. So all of that bullshit, creates a hype. Real industry implementations also are part of the hype, but the way that people regard AI is a little bit different than what it really is in the industry. And when I first looked at this, I didn't understand what exactly it means. I mean, why is NLP still in the thorough of disillusionment when all of the search engines are made with NLP at their foundation and we're using them every day? So it's a commodity, really. Why is it still not something that people regard as being part of their life? And the answer is that people, when they look at AI, they can only understand what they see. So the reason why speech recognition is being regarded as an established technology is because people in the States and in China and everywhere are using Google Assistant, Siri, and Alexa, basically devices that you communicate with by speaking. So for them, that's the AI that they see. It's not NLP because they don't really know that when they go on Google search, Google has all these engines and they have BERT and they have text analytics behind the scenes. They don't see that. And this is where the hypes come from. And what the hype does, it influences funding capabilities. So if you were to go and say, I'm starting a text analytics company and I want $5 million to create a neural networks-based technology stack, a venture capitalist is going to look at that and say, I'm not giving you 5 million because you're not doing voice. So it's really strange. And on the other hand, if you take a speech-to-text engine and you try to sell it commercially, you won't be able to because the quality is still really low. So even speech technologies are fragmented between speech biometrics, speech-to-text processing, and speech interaction or conversational speech. People only see the conversational speech part, and they think that's the epitome of what AI can do. And again, there are other factors involved in how people regard AI and how the industry and the venture capitalists see AI. First of all, they see only the big players because they, in essence, monopolize the industry. So it's Google, it's NVIDIA, it's Apple, it's Amazon. Everything is regarded through the perspective of deep learning. So if it's not deep learning based, if it's not neural networks based, for them it doesn't exist. Nobody's going to put money in a statistical engine that might be good and might work. And as I said before, for them is what they see, that's how the industry looks like. My view is totally different. So I mostly sell machine translation, then text analytics, and only then voice. Voice is the hardest thing to implement. There are few government agencies that use speech technologies. A lot of them use text analytics to filter through a lot of content, and most of them use machine translation. If you go on the street or if you go to a conference about AI and you have marketing people there, they're going to tell you the other way. They're going to tell you speech is the most prominent AI technology, and that's where we should put all our money and all our effort. So what I'm trying to say here, I'm not trying to say if I'm right or wrong, it's just there are a lot of different views on the industries. And the way you see those different views, and when you look at actually the figures, so there's a lot of companies who deal industry forecast and are trying to tell you, okay, this market is going to make X amount of money by 2024. And that's where I'm going to invest in this market, I'm going to build a software product or a company in this market. And the figures are all very inconsistent. So if you see here, it says the text analytics market is projected to grow from 3.2 billion to 8.8 billion. That, by the way, that's not a lot. But when I looked at the companies they were analyzing companies like SAP, companies like SAS, so not text analytics company, but analytics companies. It's not the same thing, right? If you do analytics on stock exchange, it's not text analytics. So all most of these reports are wrong because they're done by analytics companies and by people who do these reports once a month across all the industries. So they're not familiar with NLP, they're not familiar with finance, they're familiar with pharma, but they do these reports and they sell them anyway. And when you read them, they don't make any sense. You don't really know how big the industry is. You don't know who the key players are. If you buy 2 reports on the same topic, they're going to be almost completely different. However, there is one report that's being produced through an EU fund. This is the one marked in green. It's the European Language Tech Industry Forecast for 2020. It was presented at the Meta Forum in Brussels a couple of months ago. And it was created by people that I know and work with, and I know they're solid when it comes to their analytics. So not just some team in India who does market reports for whatever industry. And what they've found out is that the European language technology industry is valued in terms of revenues at 1 billion euros, which if you compare it to the US or the Chinese market is 100 times smaller. So what happens is actually NLP is a big thing. A lot of times we can't see it because it's hidden behind the products of big technology companies. It's part of their speech assistants, it's part of Siri, it's in their mobile phones, it's in their web browsers, it's in their advertising products, so people don't really see it. It is huge, but when it comes to European innovation and European companies who obviously don't have that kind of global reach, it actually starts to shrink down and it becomes, I would say, very, very small. And as I mentioned before, the biggest text analytics companies in Europe is Expert Systems. They're from Italy. They've been around for 25 years. And they're doing 30 million euros a year, and that's not a lot. And they only sell text analytics. I also sell their products, by the way, so I'm very familiar with the company. They have offices in the US, they have offices in France, in Italy, in Asia. And I would say that that's the best you could get from Europe if you want to do something in NLP. You might reach a level of tens of millions euros, but that's it. If you want to make billions, you need to go to the US or you need to go to China. That's where all the big money is. By the way, when Language Weaver was acquired by SDL, they paid $45 million for it. And Babel, which is a machine translation competitor of ours, received a funding recently of about $50 million to expand their operations within the machine translation. That's not a lot of money. If you talk about an AI chipset vendor from China, they receive funding of hundreds of millions. So if you look at AI as a whole, there's chipset vendors, there's, I don't know, predictive analytics, and then there's NLP. NLP is actually a very small part of AI when it comes to the money that's being put in this industry. And I think that's bad, because everything that's driven when it comes to communication is driven by text analytics. Just people are not aware of it, and all the big players are basically monopolizing this industry. Now, another way I've tried to look at the industry is try to see, okay, where does NLP actually work? Where is it, used today, and what areas it has where it can grow? And I found 6 scenarios, 6 areas. The first of all is search and social media. Basically, everything that's from Facebook to Google is being driven by text analytics. All the advertising industry, text advertising is driven by text analytics. So there isn't a doubt that's the area where NLP has the most impact in the industry. And I don't know if you've managed to play around with BERT, the new technology implemented by Google Search that can generate answers to questions. I've actually played with it. It's actually an amazing piece of NLP technology. I've played with it in Romanian, I've done it in Spanish, I've done it in English. I've sent newspaper articles to it, I've sent knowledge base, mobile phones manuals, and it can answer your questions with 99% accuracy. The level of accuracy for what Google has put in place is quite amazing. Then there's chatbots. Chatbots are a very big thing now. People don't realize that actually chatbots use NLP technology. They think it's some predefined rule-based templates there, but actually you have chatbots that can answer questions, that can drive conversation, that can understand what you're talking about. Basically, they do intent detection, they do entity extraction, they can drive multiple dialogues. So it's quite an area that it is growing. I mean, I see chatbots as one of the areas of NLP that has the most potential to grow. As you see, it's almost 30% growth rate estimated by 2024, as opposed to 7% for plain text analytics. So it's an area that people are investing in. There's a lot of players, there's a lot of interest. A lot of Romanian companies are investing in chatbots. Banca Transilvania has chatbots. Really, a lot of companies see this as the future way to communicate with their customers, and it's all driven by NLP. Then there's customer experience, and by customer experience, I'm mainly referring to personal assistants like Google and Siri. I know they don't have a lot of traction in Romania. I find them pretty useless, to be honest. They make your life 1% better. Why would you pay for that? But it is still an amazing piece of technology because it's NLP driven, it's speech to text, it's text to speech, it's understanding commands, it's understanding intent. It's quite an area that's gonna still grow in the US. And in parallel from that to that, there's an enterprise version on it which supports call centers. So a lot of the big players like Avaya, Verint, or new ones have implemented customer support centers with no humans, really, just relying on voice interactions with essentially what is a robot driven by an NLP. There's also data intelligence. This is the area that I work in most. Data intelligence means for me taking a lot of unstructured data and making sense out of it in any language. Intelligence agencies do that, marketing companies do that. It's still an area that it is visible and it's an area where you can actually sell NLP software as it is. So all those other areas that I mentioned there, NLP is hidden somewhere beneath a layer. You might not see it, you might not understand it, but for data intelligence projects, for open source intelligence, cyber threat intelligence, mobile forensics, I actually sell NLP engines. I sell a Docker container that does machine translation. I sell a Docker container that does name entity recognition. So it's still an industry that relies on NLP, and it's the path from an academic research to a product to selling it is the shortest when you go and pitch it to a data intelligence company. There's also multilingual communication, so this is where machine translation has a lot of value, helping translators work faster, helping companies communicate. Having your own Google-type translator tool within a company is still something that's viable, although you don't make a lot of money out of it. And there's what I call document digitization, which is not just OCR, it goes beyond that. It's also computer vision for handwritten text. It's also robotic process automation to understand written content like invoices or contracts, and basically eliminating people for where there's a need for them to read and work with a physical document. So these are the areas where I see NLP as being mature. Probably there are other emerging areas. In my experience, some of these areas have really a lot of money, obviously, where Google and Alexa and Amazon are in the search and social media. There's a lot of investment. And then there's areas that have less visibility, for example, multilingual communications, where I would say that the industry is either gonna go into a commodity state or it's not gonna become important anytime soon. Another view on the industry is by how it's segmented in terms of how big the companies are. So we have the big players, Google, Amazon, IBM, Watson, Microsoft. They have a lot of offerings for NLP in the cloud. They have both NLP technologies that are hidden behind other projects or other technologies that I said. They also have APIs. So this is a good thing because it makes NLP visible. So if you go online and say, I want named entity extraction API, the first results that you're gonna get is probably from IBM, Watson, and Amazon. So the offering is there, the technologies are mature. However, they don't really support a lot of languages, and this is the final part of my presentation, is trying to understand, how can we grow the support for Romanian. So none of those big players, except for machine translation, have support for Romanian. Nobody does speech-to-text for Romanian, nobody does text analytics for Romanian. So they service their own markets where they get their money from. Then we have what we call segment leaders, which are companies that deal exclusively in text analytics, machine translation, speech-to-text, and conversational AI. So we have SDL and Systran, who are undoubtedly the market leaders for machine translation in their space. We have then companies like Speechmatics, Bertin, and new ones who do speech-to-text. We have companies like Basis Technologies, Lexalytics, and Expert Systems who do text analytics, and then we have Variant and LivePerson who do conversational AI for their chatbots. These are the biggest players in their field. As I said, they're not big companies, so the biggest one there is Expert Systems, who does 30 million a year. So there's a lot of, I would say, medium to small-sized players in NLP right now that are trying to fight with the big players for a market share. And I'm going to explain how they do that, because actually a lot of these smaller companies are more successful to selling their technologies in NLP space than Google is, for example. We then have what I call do-it-yourself. So a lot of the big companies like Facebook or Google have released their frameworks for deep learning as open source. We have TensorFlow, for example, which you can pretty much do any neural networks-based training on it. You have Spacey, which is very good for text analytics. We have Rasa, which is a chatbot platform that's very, very powerful. We have OpenNMT if you want to create your own machine translation. And a lot of companies, instead of buying software, they set up internal teams that take these open source frameworks, put their own data in it, and create their own AI teams to help service their own needs. And there's even a group now at BMW that does machine translation. So in some instances, it's very okay to have your own team working on your own data, understanding the business and doing projects that help you as a company. On the other hand, why does a automotive company have a team that does machine translation? I have no idea. So I think some of these internal AI projects are a little bit disconnected to what the value is. And then we have what I call the gray area. It's gray because it's in Chinese. Basically, we have all these big platforms like Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent who are investing billions in AI, and nobody really knows exactly what their capabilities are. They could be very advanced. They have a big enough market for them to not have a need to go outside yet. But it could turn out that in 5 or 10 years from now, we're going to see some very, very advanced NLP technologies coming out of China, and it's going to be like that. So we won't know it's going to happen because basically it's a pretty closed environment, both due to the language differences and both to the fact that most of the companies there are government-owned partially, and they don't really tell you exactly what they do. So you might see, chipset competitors competing with NVIDIA for AI and chipsets. We're going to see probably platforms that compete with Google in terms of technologies. You never know. So I already keep an eye for the Chinese market because it has a lot of potential. And all of these products, all of these functionality is basically driven by academic research in the end. So a lot of the people working in this field either go to the big players or start funding their own companies or go to segment leaders like SDL. What we're doing a lot of time at SDL, we're trying to keep our people from not leaving to Google or Amazon because they're just across the road in Los Angeles. So what happens is a lot of talent gets to the big players, and the result is that you are left off either with a lot of academic projects that never make it into the industry, or with very skilled people that never go into commercial organization and prefer to remain in the academic sector. And this takes me to what the 3 top industry challenges are. The first one is the lack of talent. I mean, there's a lack of talent, period. There aren't enough data scientists. There aren't enough people graduating with the required skills. And even when there are enough data scientists, they're not in Europe, they're in the US. So 44% of relevant presentations at industry conferences that deal with NLP, PhDs and above, so even postdoctoral studies, come from the US. Then China, and then UK, Germany, Canada, France, and Japan have 2, maybe 4%. So you can understand the big difference between what US can do versus China versus Europe. So we don't have enough skill set in Europe to be able to compete with the US, even if we would have the money that they have and the venture capitalists and the funding capabilities that they have. And that's the interesting thing is that from all of these PhDs that were analyzed that might be relevant in the field, 70% of them still work in academia. So they don't really go to companies and they don't really drive the commercial value of what they do. And this is a really serious issue. Because basically if you want to create an AI startup, I have done it in Romania, you won't find skilled workforce. You won't find researchers that have the skills willing to work for your company. And this is an issue that is not only in Europe, but it's across other areas of the globe. The second issue is the lack of data. So it's not enough just to have knowledge and talent and skills and frameworks. You also need to have data. You can buy generic engines, you can buy machine translation that works. You probably won't be able to buy a speech-to-text engine that works for a use case, so you always need data. There isn't a data-driven culture in enterprises right now. People don't know that they're sitting on heaps of valuable data that they need to share or they need to use in real-life projects. There aren't a lot of public repositories with data, so if you want to go out and build a named entity recognition product tomorrow for Bulgarian, you won't be able to do that because there is no data available. So that's already a blocker. And it's the same for Romanian, by the way. And then there's the business alignment. The business alignment relates to the hype. You go to an executive and you say, I have an AI company, I want to help you solve a problem. They won't recognize that problem. They're going to be stuck with the AI hype graph in their head, and they're going to be thinking about self-driving cars, and they're going to be thinking about robots that can jump off cliffs, like the Boston Dynamics robots that you see on YouTube. So people in business, executive level, mid-management level, don't really understand how AI can help them, and even when they do realize they have a problem, they have difficulties understanding how to implement projects like that. So it's actually very, very complicated to sell machine translation, to sell AI. And one of the people that I admire a lot, which is Andrew, I'm not sure how you pronounce the second name, Andrew Ng or Andrew Ng, which is one of the top researchers that was around for Google and all the other companies, is not doing research anymore. He actually created a consulting company to help companies buy AI. Because they actually need to know how to buy AI. We produce it, but it's hard for them to buy it. It's not, especially when it's statistical or neural, and the results are not 1 or 0, right? So you don't press a button and something happens, you get a statistical result. You get something with 99% accuracy. People don't feel comfortable buying software that does something with 99% accuracy. So it's still some difficult areas that we need to tackle. And even if you have the talent and the data and you have the business fit, in order to create a commercially successful product or project, you need to first think about security. Everyone that does NLP now releases their product as an API available on a cloud. Companies don't buy APIs on clouds. Pharma companies, automotive companies, banks want everything on premise because they care about security. They don't want to send their data out, so you need to think about how you create your product. Where is it going to sit? In a data center, at the customers? It's a cloud offering, it's a private cloud offering. Another factor is the feasibility of that product. You can create a product that does, let's say, image recognition, but if it requires 16 GPU cards to run, nobody's going to buy it. So it needs to run on commodity hardware, it needs to run on CPU, it needs to be very well optimized. It also needs to be scalable. So the current technologies now require that software scales very fast. So no monolithic solutions. You need things like Docker containers, API integrations, things that can go anywhere and can connect to anything really fast. And you need adaptability. So generic engines, whether they're text analytics, speech, or machine translation, can only go so far. You need to be able to adapt those engines. You need to be able to customize those technologies. If you create a classification tool that, let's say, can classify newspaper articles using the International Advertising Bureau taxonomy, you won't be able to sell it to a bank that needs classification on documents based on the type of contracts. You don't know what the type of contracts are, so you cannot offer it by default. So you need to give the customer a way to do customizations on its own. They need you need to provide them with capabilities to be able to adapt your NLP engines to their needs and to their data. And this is becoming more and more important, and a lot of companies are actually now selling end-to-end solution where they give you a software, but they also give the capabilities to adapt it, just as you would take TensorFlow, for example, and a data set to do your own stuff. A company needs to do that, but without having the need to have data science skills. So it needs to be simple, just pressing buttons, seeing the results, seeing the evaluations, and seeing, okay, I'm going to go into production with this experiment because it's going to provide me with the best result. Now, the final part, I have like 3 more slides or 4, and then we can go to Q&A. So how I see the Romanian NLP industry. Well, if you take the 6 NLP disciplines I was talking before, I think the best represented one is machine translation, because most of the machine translation vendors have a Romanian machine translation engine. It's usually Romanian to English or English to Romanian. But since Romania is not a big market for anyone, nobody really invests in AI technologies for Romanian. And this is a big issue. It's a big issue for speech-to-text. I have only found one vendor that has a speech-to-text engine for Romanian. It's Speechmatics from the US. I work with them on a couple of projects. And Saylabs, who does broadcast monitoring. Basically, the National Integrity Agency has a software from Saylabs that monitors all the TV station, and it transcribes everything that's on the news in real time from speech to text, and they're using Saylabs. So they only created the Romanian engine for that specific project, and nobody has bought it ever since. I know Saylabs because I'm a friend with their CEO. So there isn't really a lot of need in Romania for this kind of technologies, because the market itself is not that mature and it's not that geared towards innovation. And also outside of Romania, there aren't really needs to service Romanian market from abroad, so nobody really invests in machine translation for Romanian, different language combinations. Nobody invests in speech-to-text. For OCR, things are better because OCR engines are created covering a wide range of languages, and they've been doing that for more than 10 years. For conversational bots, things have started happening. I've seen platforms being customized with Romanian to service Romanian customers like banks and finance and oil and gas organizations. So I've started putting in chatbots as a customer support channel. No chatbot platform or software comes with Romanian, so you need to build it by yourself using data, which is a bad thing in essence because you need to invest a lot of money. And when it comes to text analytics, and by that I mean name entity recognition, sentiment analysis, classification, and so on, there wasn't any commercially available text analytics engine anywhere until 6 months ago when a Romanian and a Cluj-based company created the full end-to-end support for Romanian. Emil, which is the CEO, was supposed to be here today, but he's at Patriot Fest in Bucharest. He's going to be here tomorrow. He basically has the only commercially available offering in the world that does name entity extraction, sentiment analysis, semantic comparison, classification, and I think that's it for Romanian. And it's already being sold and used by a lot of companies in the intelligence space. So the landscapes for supporting Romanian is not good. Actually, it's very, very bad. And there is potential, and I think things are moving to a right direction. But I've had dozens of conversations every year with Romanian customers that were asking me, can you support Romanian? And I would go to a company like Expert System, and they didn't have support, and they would
tell me if they give me $1 million, I can create support for Romanian. Nobody's ready to pre-invest in Romanian support because they never know if they're going to get their money back. And that's a pretty bad thing. Now, the challenges are, again, related to the market size. So the market in Romania, in general, for this type of technology is small, so vendors are not really willing to invest in it beforehand. Also, there's a lot of, sorry, there are a lot of innovation blockers, meaning that if you want to create a company that sells AI for the Romanian market, it would be very difficult to get funding. There aren't venture capitalists in Romania. European funds are very restrictive and very bureaucratic, so that's a blocker. I mean, if nobody gives you enough money to collect data, build data sets, do experiments, productize software, and that will cost you at least €500,000 for one engine, people are not going to do it. So, in essence, if you don't have money, if you don't have investments, if you don't have a need, basically there's no way you can create products, and that's a serious blocker. And also there's the knowledge transfer part. From my personal experience, when I've tried to help Emil build his company, we had serious difficulties getting skilled researchers on board and making use of their knowledge. And it's not because there aren't any. There are a lot of skilled researchers in NLP in Romania. There isn't a lot of willingness for them to work in the commercial space. You remember those 77% of PhDs who still are in academia is the same in Romania. So we had to use people from France, we had to use people from Hungary, people from Italy to do research for us to create a product that will service the Romanian market. And that was quite disappointing. But the two good things are that RPA has started to drive NLP requirements more and more. How many of you have heard of UiPath? Yeah, so the biggest robotic process automation provider in the world, they're in Bucharest. They're valued now are, I don't know how many $billion, so they're extremely huge. I started working with them around 6 months ago. What I found out is all of their processes depend on NLP. They cannot really automate the processing of invoices if there isn't a software that can understand what's in those invoices. They've been using OCR, doesn't work. Invoices are not a good suit to using Abby Fine Reader, so they need computer vision to read areas and determine what's handwritten text, what's a stamp, what's a signature. They need classification to understand what's a product, what's a company name. So essentially, most of their products and most of their implementations depend on NLP, and this has started to drive the market. I'm working with them on a weekly basis for several projects, and all of their projects require NLP, not necessarily for Romanian, but in general, the RPA domain, which is one of the highest and fastest growing domains in technology right now, depends on NLP, and that's going to see an increase of the NLP market driven by RPA. And the second one this is very specific, is the European Language Grid project, which I think is going to help the Romanian NLP industry and not just commercial organization, but also researchers. The fact that there's going to be a platform where you can upload data sets. I put a picture of Mr. Tufish there. I didn't ask for his permission before, but it's taken from the ELG website. So for you who don't know what the ELG is, it's a European funded project that's going to offer an infrastructure to deploy NLP engines and data sets, which will hopefully make access to Romanian resources, whether they're data set resources or software resources, much easier. And hopefully this is going to drive innovation in the sense that having a platform that works and is visible and is used by the industry to make purchases from is going to make researchers say, okay, I can actually make money with my research. I want to sell my data set. I want to sell my algorithms. I want to package what I've created into a software and put it on the European Language Grid. My view is that this should become like an Amazon for Europe, for NLP and for text analytics. The way you can interact with the ELG is through the national competency centers, and hopefully enough, Mr. Dan Tufish is the representative of ELG in Romania. So if you have any projects, any data sets that you think might be a fit for the ELG and can bring visibility into Romanian research and NLP technologies, obviously you can reach out to Mr. Tufiș, who's here with us. That was it basically from my presentation. I'm not sure if you still have time for Q&A, but if we do, I'll be more than happy to answer
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the very interesting presentation, and I think it was a very good idea to put in the beginning of our conference a session on industry, a view from industry, because our majority are from research and universities, and I think the problem that you very well presented, that especially in Europe, as comparing to US and probably China, we lack this connection with companies. I think it's a cold shower for us, I think, and especially for Romania. Yes. So I think we have time for questions, so please.
You talk about USA, Europe, and China. What about Russia? And you know why? Because I'm working there at Moscow. I'm a Spanish teacher at the Instituto Cervantes there. And I think they are starting to invest in language technology too. I don't know many things, but could you tell me something?
You're right. So if you look at the Yandex has around, 70 machine translation engines available. So they're doing it just like Google. And they're very good. And they have languages that I've never even heard of. What I didn't put Russia there because they have zero influence in the international market. So they're doing things for the Russian market. It's also because of politics. If you want to be a successful Russian researcher, you move to the US. A lot of the companies I work with have CTOs that are Russian and researchers that are Russian. Babel has a Russian VP of Applied AI. It's very difficult to do anything directly from Russia with the Russian company, but they are very advanced. And especially for machine translation and especially for AI for the military sector, they're extremely advanced. It's just, we're probably only going to see them when shit goes down, but hopefully not.
Other questions? Yes.
I saw rather small mentions about the academic research in your presentation. So you are, of course, focused on industrial research, but in Romania, you should know that there are a number of laboratories where NLP is being studied. And I am asking, why do you think that there is this big discrepancy between industrial and academic research? And maybe you could open our eyes for why industry does not look a little bit more attentive on the grounds of the universities.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I didn't want to be overly critical about the academic space. I know there are research labs, and actually I found about them while I was trying to find data corpuses for Romania, and that's how I found out about the work that has been done in Iași, for example. However, what I've seen is not, it's a matter of where the researchers see their future. So a lot of good researchers in NLP are going abroad and work for big companies. And that has zero impact for the Romanian NLP industry because I cannot hire them with my Romanian company because I cannot really pay the salaries or that Amazon does, and that's a factor, obviously. It's not a bad thing for research. I mean, if I would have been a very good researcher, I would have loved to work for Microsoft or Google and Amazon. So you cannot stop that from happening. The exodus of brain to the US is inevitable. There's nothing you can do about it. The second is the general industry climate, should I call it. So if you want to do a startup, you don't get funding. There aren't really a lot of success stories of people in Romania who have done successful startups in AI. Maybe just a couple, maybe 3 or 4. And even those are probably overinflated by the press, so they really don't make money. So if you're a researcher, why would you go and risk your academic career and invest a lot of money in something that is probably going to fail, commercially speaking? So it's really not the researcher's fault, it's just the way things are. We're a small market. AI is driven by the US, and basically there aren't any opportunities to become, financial or commercially successful with AI in Romania. So why would you do it? I mean, I've tried to hire people from the Cluj University for some of my projects, and they were never willing to invest their time more than 2 hours a day into a commercial engagement. They're comfortable at the university, it's stable, it's risk-free, it's rewarding. It's being a professor at university in Romania, it's a very accomplishing thing. The alternative is trying to fight for 3 or 5 years in a startup and then losing your money, failing, and probably neglecting your academic career. So in essence, it's a lack of money. It's a lack of industry, it's a lack of focus, a lack of venture capitalists, of investments, which basically block all the transfer of knowledge, really.
So, does this work? Okay. So would you say that actually the industry tries to maximize short-term goals over long-term investment? And do you think that could be a problem for people staying in academia rather than moving to a commercial company?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think because of the hype, people do think that if they do something in AI, they're going to become billionaires in the next year or so, and that's not true. Except for the US, AI is very underfunded, also in Europe, so you would need an investment of around 5 years before it become productive. So I've helped the Romanian company I was telling you market their products. They're on the market for around 5 years, and they're still not able to sell their solutions in Romania. Everything they've sold was abroad. They have started engaging with some public authorities and some banks in selling AI, but they've sold their technology, they sell software licenses the second they release the product in the US, and then Switzerland, and then also the UK. Still nobody from Romania is buying it, although they invested in buying a Romanian NLP technology stack, which cost around 100,000 euros, nobody's buying it. So it's, in the end, if you don't have a market, there's pretty much not a lot you can do. And, everyone going and flashing, we do AI, actually, just a small number of companies are doing AI. And what they mean by AI is they take TensorFlow and they throw data at it, and they have some grasp of what machine learning is. But nobody has an in-house, in Romania, there isn't a company that has an in-house researcher that actually knows what the hell they're doing. So if their training fails, it's like, let's throw out the data set and maybe this will work. Nobody actually knows algorithms, nobody actually knows what TensorFlow is doing, nobody knows how to customize anything, and nobody's building platforms. SDL is building platforms. We're using our own machine translation platforms. A lot of the other companies are using OpenNMT or MariaNMT. That's not AI. That's just playing with what somebody else built. In Romania, it's hard. So to get a research team in-house and build a platform and make a productive offering, you will need to spend a couple of million euros per year for 5 years before you become productive. I haven't heard anyone getting 50 million euros in Romania to create an AI company. And that's not going to happen probably anytime soon.
Yes, in fact, I'm representing Bucharest Polytechnic University. We also have a group of young, not so young researchers and professors in NLP. Some of the younger, I think they were involved in some startups, but I think it took maybe a couple of years and everything was closed. Other questions? If not, I have also a question. You said that chatbots will be next year's 40 or 30%. But what about ethical problems? You know that chatbot of Microsoft, which was closed.
The chatbot that was that became a Nazi in the end. Yeah. There's a lot of discussions about ethical AI and actually about explainable AI, because what the Microsoft bot proved is that if you throw data at it, it's just going to learn what you tell him to. Yeah. So there were groups on those forums, I believe 8chan, that were actually getting organized and were working to influence that chatbot in becoming, sexist and homophobe and so on. But the problem is, first of all, most of the technologies now are built using neural networks, which is essentially a black box. So there's no way of knowing what happens there or how to influence it. And a lot of companies just throw data at TensorFlow or other machine deep learning frameworks and get a result. So if something goes wrong, you have no way of figuring out what's happening. There are a lot of initiatives around, ethical AI and, making sure that AI stays in its place. I don't really care a lot about those problems because from my perspective, AI is, and NLP is something that helps you work faster. So, you always need a human output and a human verification step in the loop. Even with machine translation, you can translate 1 billion documents and search through them, but at the end, if you're a law enforcement agency and you're reading, content from Twitter and you think somebody's recruiting on behalf of the Islamic State, you still need a person at the end to tell you to read the content and manually confirm, okay, this was true, what the AI engine told me was correct or not correct. So I think that the industry is a little bit too obsessed with the ethical aspect of AI, and that's due to a lot of politics that are happening in the US, but we're not there yet. AI is just in its infancy. I think we still need to discuss more important issues like, where do we put it, how do we sell it, what problems we're trying to solve, and how do we get more traction from companies in implementing AI solutions. And maybe after that we can think about, ethical aspects, but that's like a fine-tuning that you do at the end after you've delivered 99% of your project.
Okay, thank you. So, Arvada. Okay, if not, thank you again for very interesting presentation and discussion.